It's a dog's life and we love it like that. We're doing alright, maybe because we're not cats. Hi there guys, and no, I haven't taken leave of my senses. It's just that today we're covering something different in the form of 101 Dalmatian Street. This was a recommendation from one of my viewers, so a shout out to Dorothy the UI fanatic. It may take a while, but I will always try to get around to any suggestions you guys make eventually. This particular video will be a relatively short one, where I touch on the key aspects of the show, and give my thoughts on what I think did and didn't work. As far as the background of the show, it was a somewhat obscure Disney title that only ran for one season. Each episode contained two different stories, with an occasional two-parter mixed in. As you may have guessed from the name, it did take inspiration from the classic book and films 101 Dalmatians. However, it's not really a sequel or anything. In fact, most of this show has nothing to do with any of the movies or the book at all. Instead, the main characters are a bunch of puppies who are descendants of Pongo and Perdita, who are of course from the original stories. In fact, the mother of the puppies in this show is revealed to be the great-great-granddaughter of those two. The show is also set in Camden Town, and the landmarks of London can regularly be seen. Onto some of the episodes now. The pilot episode actually does a good job of showing what the series is all about. You will probably know whether you will like the show or not based only on that. It shows off the manic house full of puppies, and how their mum and dad and the two older siblings, Dolly and Dylan, take turns taking care of them. It also sets up the dog's relationship with the humans in the show. Obviously the dogs talk like humans to each other, but the humans can't really understand them. So to them they sound just like normal dogs barking. The dogs kind of think the humans are a bit silly, but at the same time the pups are quite trusting of them, which gets them into trouble a few times, especially in the last episode. In terms of the general themes of this show, if you watch even a bit of it, it becomes apparent that it's very energetic. From the animation, which is in a simple two-dimensional style, but it has a lot of quick movements and bright colours, to the fast-paced action-style plots, to the voice acting, it all has a very lively feel to it. On the voice acting in particular, I think it's very well done. Clearly a lot of energy was put into the performances, and you can tell that none of the staff were phoning it in.
One makes me breakfast in bed, the other makes a mess.
No, Mom, this was all Dolly.
Why can't you be more like Dylan?
Uh-oh.
After all I did to surprise you, well, happy Mother's Day!
Now the humour here wasn't really to my taste. It is technically a kids show after all, so it's filled with bad puns and juvenile humour. I think the show kind of relies on the frantic pace of all the action to keep you interested more than anything else. That frantic pace is a double-edged sword though, because at times they find it hard to get the characters to stand out. Now of course there is 101 puppies, so it's impossible to make them all important, which is why most of them play background roles. The way they try to work around this issue is to divide up spotlight episodes, which focus on some of the pups individually. When this show is focused, is when it's at its best, in my opinion, which is why I tended to prefer these episodes, along with the two-parters. One of my favourite episodes is called Doggy Da Vinci. It focuses on the puppy Da Vinci, who, you guessed it, is an artist. It starts off as some fun watching her express herself freely, but it takes a bit more of a dark turn halfway through. Her parents and older siblings argue over her art, and they each have their own idea on how she should pursue it. One wants to push her too hard, and the other gives some pretty poor advice. This causes some anxiety in Da Vinci, and she runs away, and as usual for this show, ends up getting herself into trouble. Of course, all is well in the end, but this episode did touch on some real issues some young people may be facing, especially if they can't find outlets for their creativity and such, and it did it in a subtle way as well. Despite this show being a kids show, it isn't afraid to have a bit of satire in there, and believe it or not, there is actually a strong horror element to a fair few of these episodes. They usually do the format justice as well. Episodes like The Walls Are Alive and Fear Window, which is a parody of Rear Window, are prime examples of that. Now you're probably saying, this can't be a version of 101 Dalmatians without Cruella de Vil. Well, you would be right. Cruella does appear in this series, although for most of it not in a big role. Her voice is heard a few times in the background, but the antagonist for most of the series is her great nephew Hunter de Vil. He is slowly revealed throughout the series, but is mostly treated as a goofball and someone the pups don't really fear. That is until the last episode, and the arrival of Cruella herself. Hunter is desperate to appease her, so being the naive kid he is, helps her get the puppies in her clutches. The final episode, the DeVille Wears Puppies, is my favourite of the entire series, by the way. It has a good sense of drama, and some good action scenes, and Cruella does bring this sense of danger to proceedings. Honestly, she's even more evil and crazy here than she ever was before. The ending is also pretty good, as after going through a lot of trauma himself at the hands of Cruella, and having a chance to actually relate to the pups, Hunter ends up turning on his auntie, finally standing up to her and saving the pups. It really is a feel-good ending, not only because Cruella gets arrested, but also because it wraps up all the character arcs in a nice way, even Hunter's, who I didn't even expect to have a character arc. I do wonder what happened to him after this though. Does he just go back to living by himself with his traitorous cat in his luxury penthouse? I mean, I guess so, but you guys let me know what you think. Either way, whether it was intended to be a series finale or not, this damn sure worked well as one. Now, there were a few things about this show which I definitely didn't like as much. I'm not going to dwell on them, but they do need to be covered a little bit. The episode Snow Day was a bit boring, I think. Remember how I said this show was better with a focus? Well, this had none really. I was also not particularly fond of the episode Don't Push Your Luck. It was intended to flesh out Dolly some more, but it just fell a bit flat. I mean, I'm not a massive skateboarding fan, so maybe that's why. The more annoying characters to me were outside of the main ones. There is this crew consisting of Fergus, who is a fox, Sid, who is a squirrel, and Big Fee, who is a rat. They appear sporadically throughout the series, often either trying to be a little bit antagonistic or trying to teach the pups some lessons about random things. But I never found these parts interesting, and these three just kind of got on my nerves. I can at least accept the pups being loud and obnoxious, but I don't need even more characters to fill that same role. And that's about all for the notes I made to talk about. I kind of took my time watching this show in a very chill way. I often had it on in the background, or when I had some spare time to kill. Maybe I was at fault for not concentrating on it enough. But I think it's actually the best way to watch the show. That kind of leads me on nicely to my overall thoughts on it. This show wasn't really my cup of tea. I don't typically seek out these overly loud and energetic shows, so I almost certainly wouldn't have given it a try had it not been recommended, and there wasn't really enough laughs to make this something I would ever want to watch again. All that being said, I don't regret watching the show. It actually had more substance to it than I expected, and as I said, it did mix in some satire, some parodies, and even the odd life lesson. And the horror type vibe in some of the episodes was definitely a nice surprise for me. So even though it's not really to my taste, I would still say that objectively, this show was okay. I can see why it would appeal to kids, and if you're into the more loud, flashy stuff, there will be something of substance there for you too. So yeah, thank you again for the recommendation. It was certainly an interesting one. I did actually gain some respect for this show, and clearly the people behind it put the effort in to try and make it stand out. As it stands, I don't ever expect it to come back for a season 2, but if it ever gets really popular on Disney Plus, maybe it'll happen. And if it ever does, I will make sure to at least check it out. If anyone has anything to add about this show, or has any of their own show recommendations for me to cover, please leave a comment here. Or alternatively, you could reply in my community section at any time. That's about all for me today, guys. Thanks for watching, and take care.